Good morning, South Rock. Welcome to another Acts devotion. We are finishing up Acts 16, which means we're just plugging right along through this. We're in verses 16 through 40. This is a very famous story, so I'm just going to hit the highlights and ask a couple questions. Paul and Silas are making their way through a missionary journey when a slave girl who has a spirit within her that allows her to divine and tell fortunes in the future is following them. It literally says that Paul is greatly annoyed, and so he casts the spirit out of her. She is saved that day, but this causes local businessmen to lose money because they no longer know the future. And so what they do is they have Paul and Silas beaten, thrown in jail. And this is the story of the Philippian jailer. They are in jail, they're singing hymns, they are praying. When a great earthquake comes, it looses their chains, it sets them free, and the jailer's about to kill himself because this will be a terrible event that all the prisoners are set free. But Paul and Silas save him from physical death, but also from eternal death, as he and his household are baptized and saved for this reason. So my two questions come from this. First, from the story of the servant girl. The people that had Paul and Silas beaten and jailed, they had their own interests ahead of what was going on in the kingdom. They had their own interests ahead of what Jesus was doing for this slave girl and for Paul and Silas. And so my question is a heavy one. What are we putting ahead of Jesus in our lives today? What are you specifically putting ahead of your faith, ahead of what Jesus is doing? It might be fear, but for instance, for me, social media. I've deleted and re-downloaded Twitter so many times because I think I can handle it each time, but every time I tend to put it ahead of my relationship. So it gets deleted. But that'd be a good example for me. The second question is this: how are you responding to people who disagree with you right now? I mentioned it last week. This is a time of divisiveness, or divisiveness, however you want to pronounce it, but there's a lot of Republican versus Democrat, this is a hoax versus this isn't, I don't want to wear a mask, I do want to wear a mask. Notice that Paul and Silas's response to being beaten and jailed, like true visceral divisiveness, was to pray and sing hymns. Maybe that's how we ought to respond to some of this stuff, is pray and sing hymns. So I guess my question is, where's your heart at with that? Where's your heart at in this time of unsure left, right, versus everything? And is it at praying and singing hymns? Is that where you're at? Because that's where God is. So I hope you've enjoyed this time. I've certainly enjoyed this story with you, and have a great rest of your day.